Sarah Song, a writer for Time magazine, quoted comedian Jerry Seinfeld in 2004 when he joshed, "The average American would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy at a funeral." Penny Singer then wrote in the New York Times that according to Dr. Gilda Carl, head of interchange communications training in Yonkers, most people rank public speaking as their #1 fear, surpassing the fear of heights, bugs, deep water, and often the fear of death itself. It's very rare that anybody is not afraid of public speaking. By the end of my speech, we will all be aware of just how much the human brain has to do with someone becoming nervous. First, we will look into the hindbrain. Secondly, we'll delve into the midbrain. And last but not least, we will forge our way into the forebrain. First, let's take a look at the hindbrain and discover where it is located, how it triggers these responses, and how one can work to accept their nervousness. Elaine Marieb, author of the textbook Human Anatomy and Physiology, the 8th edition, states that the hindbrain consists of the medulla oblongata, the cerebellum, and the pons, which work collectively to support vital bodily processes. All in all, survival is what matters most to the hindbrain. Back in our hunting and gathering days as early hominids, in order to survive, they would need to live in groups. Their biggest fear was they might get kicked out of this group by saying or doing something unwise in front of the other members. This links with our Homo sapiens act today. One becomes nervous when public speaking because they are afraid they... Clella Yaffe, author of the book Public Speaking, Concepts and Skills for a Diverse Society, states that the hindbrain cannot distinguish between physically threatening situations and psychologically threatening experiences. This links, today when humans are afraid of public speaking, it is because their hindbrain is telling them that if they say something the audience will not like, they might be thrown out of the group. And in the census years ago, that meant they would most likely end up dead. We all know this is not true because 2 weeks ago we all gave public speeches, and I'm sure we're all still here. But the hindbrain does not exactly know that. The hindbrain, when feels threatened, it triggers our fight or flight survival mechanism. So do we fight our nervousness, or do we try to avoid public speaking altogether? PublicSpeakingSkills.org states 2 ways one can reduce their nervousness about public speaking. First is the power of positive thinking. They say that if one tenses the muscles in their lower arm, it will cause their fingers to tremble. This is what happens when one is suffering from anxiety. They say if one starts to feel nervous, to say to themselves, that's not nerves or anxiety, it's adrenaline, fantastic, because one needs adrenaline to give their presentation more energy and power. Secondly, PublicSpeakingSkills.org accentuates the need to have controlled breathing. They say if one feels they are becoming nervous, to aim to take 2 to 3 breaths per minute in order to control the wobble in their voice. Now that we have looked into how the hindbrain is associated with our survival, let's take a look at how our midbrain works with our emotions to tell us how we feel when giving a public speech. The midbrain is located between the forebrain and the hindbrain and is approximately 2 centimeters long. Elaine Marieb defines the midbrain as the conducting pathways between the upper and lower brain centers. When one becomes nervous from public speaking is because their midbrain is reminded of a previous nerve-wracking experience while public speaking. If one can look at their situation that has led them to become overly nervous in the first place, they then can see how they can help their midbrain relax when giving a speech. One of the common reasons people become most nervous about public speaking is because of demand. Most people think that a couple of common demands are that they need to be interesting and intriguing, and that they need to also make sure they do not show how nervous they are. Most people become nervous about public speaking because they are afraid they'll never be able to fulfill these demands. Olivia Mitchell, a presentation trainer based in New Zealand, uses a technique with her students to help them reduce their fear of public speaking. First is to take their last encounter with public speaking and put it on a scale of 0 to 10. Most people rank their fear as either close to 1 or close to 10. Secondly, she says for them to take their last encounter and compare it to losing a limb. Most people would put this incident up beyond a 10. She finally says to take these incidents and compare them side by side. If we put these 2 things into perspective, we can see that as nerve-wracking as public speaking may be, it's not as bad as losing a limb. Now, let's take a look into the forebrain and see how we can work with accepting our nervousness overall. Elaine Maria defines the forebrain as the largest part of the brain, most of which is made up of the cerebrum. The forebrain is the conscious thinking part of the brain. Most humans have patterns of thinking that affect their nervousness. One can reduce their nervousness by observing their patterns of thinking. Leslie Pugsley says in How to Give an Effective Presentation that one way to reduce their nervousness is to have confidence in what they are going to be speaking about. She says that if one practices their speech and they are aware of how they are going to present it in front of everybody and practice their presentation, they will not only become more confident in what they are going to be speaking about, but will be able to deal with technical situations if they should come up. Sorry. Now that we have gone through the three parts of the human brain, we saw how the hindbrain is connected with fight or flight mechanism when we become afraid. Secondly, we looked into our midbrain and how it's connected with our emotions. Lastly, we looked into our forebrain and how it is connected with our consciousness. While each of these three parts of the human brain each contribute in their own way to how the human brain responds to public speaking, we can see how the hindbrain is associated with survival, where the fight or flight mechanism tells us what we should do when we become afraid. Secondly, we looked into the midbrain and how it is associated with our emotions, and when it becomes nervous, it is because it is being reminded of a previous nerve-wracking experience. Finally, we covered the forebrain and how it is associated with our consciousness of the world around it, and how we are really trying to gain the approval of everybody around us, which we all know everybody really does want to be, everyone really does want to be approved by everybody. I hope this presentation has aided you as it has aided me in presenting and writing it to be the one giving the eulogy rather than being the one in the casket. Thank you.